Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM, New Haven's home for community radio. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tickle. No one makes New Haven and Washington, D.C. tick more than U.S. Representative Rosa DeLauro. She's our person in Washington, making laws and trying to make laws when they make laws in Washington. She's here to fill us in on all the craziness happening in Washington and what we can hope for in the weeks ahead. Rosa DeLauro, thank you so much for coming back to WNHH-FM studio.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to be with you, Paul. It's great to be a part of this effort here. And what you do with community news, this is great.
So, obviously, everyone's reading these days about the big battles over the debt limit and the $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation. But until 5 minutes ago, we were talking, and Robin Porter says, hello, Queen Bee Rosa, love you.
Love her.
You were actually on getting a lot of attention for something that we were talking about until 5 minutes ago, which was the child tax credit. Something happened in August and September that has not happened in our lifetime. In America, we had the largest one-year ever decrease in child poverty in 1 month in U.S. history. The end of July, child poverty was 41% lower than it had been. It declined from 15.8% to 11.9% in 1 month. I said that really fast, but that's actually millions of people. Millions of kids were not having enough to eat. Millions of kids were living poor at the beginning of July. At the end of July, millions of them were not. The biggest change in the history of our country. And it happened again in August. And it happened because of a new child tax credit that went into effect that Rosa DeLauro spent 18 years trying to pass, and it passed. So, first of all, what did that feel like when you saw those numbers? That's a softball question. Get to the meat.
It is, but when you believe in something, and I believe in my heart and soul that the child tax credit is the most transformative piece of legislation that we can be engaging in at this point in our nation's history. And then when the numbers really bear you out about what the effect, I can just say it will lift 55% of kids out of poverty. It helps, struggling middle-class families, vulnerable families, working families. You can say those words, but when the science, the data proves it, then there are no words to express.
And I got those
how
numbers
committed I am.
for The Economist, which is an international magazine, which was just blown away by how something that we paid attention to for 30 seconds before getting to all the other Michigas actually had this life-changing impact. He also talked about not only that the child poverty rate went down, but kids were less hungry.
Hunger.
So families with children who say they didn't have enough food in the last week, that went down 13.7% in the country, which is really quite an upsetting number, to 9.5%. Still an upsetting number, but that's like a huge difference. So you work on something for 18 years. It's a little wonky. People don't really talk about tax credit much, but it got done. So how does it work now, Rose? I want people to walk through it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
So it's not that we send people, anyone could just get a check just because they're poor. You have to file a tax reform form even if you don't pay taxes.
That's right.
And then you get a tax credit back even if you don't pay taxes. And tell me if I got the numbers right. If you're a family and you have young kids under 6, you get $300 a month total, no matter how many kids.
No, per child.
Oh, per child.
Per child.
So you have 4 kids, you get $1,200.
Right.
Then and over 6 years old, it's $250 per household, and you don't have to be poor. This is like under that whole debate that Stanley Greenberg has written about social policy that affects all income levels to get broader support like Social Security. That was the concept here. So it's not everybody, but up to $240,000 a year in household income, you get something, but it lessens over time. But it lasts for 12 months, correct?
Yes, it was part of the American Rescue Plan that President Biden, put into effect and signed into law. We voted for it, and he signed it into law. And so, the check started in July. The 15th of every month is July, August, September, October, November, and December. And then next year would be a lump sum portion of money.
But can you explain? I'm sorry. What does that mean? They're not going to come every month in 2020?
No. That's what I'm trying to do, is to work to make sure that we have that we make the child tax credit permanent. So that
I know. But was it a 6-month or a 12-month?
It's 12 months.
So how does the second 6 months work?
The second 6 months is that they're going to get that in a lump sum.
At the beginning or the end of the period?
I think it is at the end of the period.
At the end of 6 months.
When you're filing again.
So that will be a little bit of a 6-month increase then in child poverty till they get that check.
Well, and that's what's we have something that is working. It really is an immediate way in which of reducing child poverty, which, as you have pointed out, has already had profound, tangible results. And your other point about it, 90% of children, all children, 90% of all children in the United States get the same benefit. So it's something like, how we deal with Social Security. And Social Security is universal in that context, as is this. So whether you are a poor, vulnerable family, if you're working family, if you're a middle-class family, all these folks are struggling these days. And what I have seen a number of the studies of what people are spending their money on. It is food. It is diapers. It is, going to the dentist, getting a kid to a doctor, buying school uniforms, or supplies, or being able to pay a rent or so forth for a family. And it has made a profound difference already, which is why trying to move it to being permanent. And because I believe.
How's that looking?
Well, look, I have to be realistic, because it's part of the $3.5 trillion project legislation.
That's the budget reconciliation bill. That's the big fight that we've already been told is going to be going down to 1.5 to 2 trillion.
Well, so that is going down. So for me, what I want to see is that we at least have this with the $300 per child per month and the $250 per child per month for kids who are 6 to 17. Have that go through 2025, and then it can come up to a, to be.
And this is getting really wonky, but tell me if I understand this correctly. The reason we're talking about these years, because it really just should be permanent. Permanent should be permanent. But part of the issue here is that as the negotiations go on to try to pass some form of this bill, which is not a given, they might be having it go less into the future, so the price tag isn't as high. That's
right. That's what they're contemplating. But when you think about it, this is why I still talk about permanence. And these are not my numbers. But Columbia University, for every dollar that we spend in the child tax credit, we get $8 in return. Child poverty costs this country between $800 billion and $1 trillion every single year.
What does that mean in terms of public benefits people get, in terms of social service help they need?
Yeah, that's right. It is, and you think about how you can cut back on that. And Columbia University says, it's like the cost benefit is really extraordinary, and that return on investment here.
Now, if we lived, and we don't, if we lived in Western Europe, this stuff's already a given.
Yes, it's a given.
And they invest in this.
Canada.
And people, they don't get it.
And
if I'm not mistaken, this is not usually done through tax credits because there's enough political support to just have it be checks you get. Tell me if I got this correctly. So I think it was Bill Clinton when he was president who realized that if government is going to help the neediest, because of the way public debate has been redefined since Ronald Reagan and since the conservative think tanks have their pundits telling you government's the enemy and they want to take your taxes, that way it's harder to just do public support for people who got such a bad name. So that's how the earned income tax credit idea came out. And it's kind of a backwards way, because first you have to file a tax return, even if you're not making money, to get the money back. But it succeeded. It was a way everyone could feel good about. Now you succeeded in doing that here with helping families. And there are Republicans who agree with you. There's Mitt Romney and Marco Rubio who have different versions. They have different ideas about how to do it. But the basic concept that we should be helping out their families had Republican support. Are you going to be able to get any of that here, or have the politics gotten so polluted with this budget reconciliation that you're just not going to get any Republicans willing to sign on?
Well, let me step back for a second, because early on, when I wrote the book, The Least Among Us, I found in examining the social safety net that there were Democrats and Republicans who crafted that legislation because they recognized the challenges that the country was facing, and they came together around them. Also on the child tax credit, there has been in the past Republican support. Actually, Newt Gingrich for a while talked about, a $500 child tax credit. He then pulled back from that, so that it has had in the past Republican support. So if you think about it, it was not even part of public discourse not that many years ago. And one of the things I found out with regard to the child tax credit, there wasn't real opposition, but there was an indifference to child poverty. I mean, child poverty has existed for a very long time in this country. So my hope is, and Senator Romney, Senator Rubio's programs, I mean, they would take money for Social Security, they would take money from something else, which doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's one disagreement they have with you. Isn't the second disagreement is they want to have work requirements?
Well, I don't know about Romney and Rubio. That's something that
Joe Manchin.
Joe Manchin has said that. But listen, you could take a look at the Canadian experience. They just did a survey. Canada has a child allowance. They found,
so it's not a tax credit; it's an allowance.
Yes. Well, this actually, because you do get a check. A family gets a check every month. So, so it's in essence, it's a tax cut.
And Nancy Elizabeth says child care costs are stifling the younger generation. Thanks for listening, Nancy.
Right, that's right. And people could pay for child care. That would mean they could go back to work. That's
part of the cost to society.
That's part of the cost to society. And what you say with work requirements, if we don't have a way for families to get their kids to child care, they don't go to work.
So is it catch-22? They're saying you got to work, but then you can't work.
And then, look, the pandemic really raised this issue, Paul. Women en masse out of the workforce because there was no child care and there was no paid family and medical leave. And there was no, at that point, except since this past July, a child tax credit so that they can go back to work. But you think about that, and the Canadian study showed that there was no decline in work hours or people working. Folks felt that this was a help. They're still tight for people. Their economy is still
right. We need people in the workforce, and they need to get childcare to work.
That's right. But they also this is one piece. People, it's an awful debate to think that people don't want to work. That is not the case. You're identified by your job. I'm identified by my job.
Too much.
That's where people are. They take pride in what they do. And think about stay-at-home moms. Stay-at-home moms.
That's a hard job.
Think about why shouldn't they get the advantage of a child tax credit? Today, grandparents. I think I have one statistic here. In the 2020 census, 5.8 million children live in the U.S. live in households headed by their grandparents, or 7.9% of all children under the 18. Now, why shouldn't their families get the benefit of a child tax credit? And again, I just say this to you, that it provides people with the opportunity to be able to work.
You're listening to Rosa DeLauro, U.S. Representative from New Haven, in the middle of all the biggest battles of our time in Washington. She's visiting us here today at Dateline, New Haven, WNHH-FM. David Sepulveda writes in human infrastructure, which I guess is what we're talking about with that second bill. And thank you, David. Suzanne Lazaro says, but if we are spending fund on child tax credits, that may not be there, federal deficit, and then will the business not be taxed to correct the deficit? And how can they hire? Is there not a federal deficit as we speak?
Well, yes, there is a federal...
And thanks for the question, Suzanne.
Thank you, Suzanne. But there is a federal deficit, but the fact of the matter is that let's take a look at where that deficit was created, okay? Not that long ago, we saw under a prior administration that there was a $2 trillion tax cut that benefited the richest 0.1% of the people in this country. And no one bothered to think about whether or not that was going to create a deficit, and we have to be concerned about it. We do have to be concerned about a deficit. We also have to be concerned that there's over $1 trillion, or between $800 billion and $1 trillion, that we expend on child poverty. And the other piece of this is that from the IRS, they tell us, and this is not my words, we leave $1 trillion on the table because we do not have adequate enforcement and compliance.
It was weird that got taken out of the bill as a fund. I mean, because really what Suzanne's bringing up is a whole separate debate we can't do a whole show on about whether we can start pulling back a tiny bit of that tax cut for the wealthy to pay for this stuff.
It's not pulling
but
that
even
back.
IRS enforcement, why did that get pulled?
Well, it's not it didn't get pulled. That is, I have put in the appropriations bill
you did? Okay.
money for the IRS for enforcement.
Right.
We have corporations today that do not pay any taxes, and it's it's crazy. And the richest, the most wealthy, they find all the tax loopholes in the world, and it is working people, middle class families, the vulnerable families who are the people who are most looked at, and we try to put the most restrictions on those folks to be able to try to get ahead.
So my question is, it seems to me that while these are such important issues, and you just answered it very completely, how do you pay for this, the deficit, the merits, the whole work argument, are we now at a stage, though, where this bill's getting cut in half, and rather than arguing about the merits of this plan, which is an important argument,
right,
we're really talking about priorities, correct?
Yes.
What's going to be left in the bill and if it's even going to pass?
Mm-hmm.
So what are the prospects of having this make the cut over some other?
Yeah, no, let me, I'm just going to start from here, Paul. It's going to pass. We will pass both the infrastructure bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we will pass this, what someone has just called it's human infrastructure, which includes the child tax credit, paid family and medical leave, yes, and child care. There will be some iteration of that. Some folks say, let's do a little bit here, a little bit there, etc., and take care of all of the pieces. And that includes housing, education, climate, etc. All very, very worthwhile efforts. But when you're narrowing, when you have to narrow down, and I also want to say something, people have been focused on the price tag, what it's about. Take a look at what we are speaking about in terms of people's lives and what a difference that it would make. I have to go back to something you said earlier, which is we are no longer at a position where it's you got to get government off your back. Let me just tell you, the American Rescue Plan, as I travel around the district all over, whether it's businesses, whether it's hospitals, whether they're the nonprofits, whether they're restaurants, have said we would not have survived without the government intervention.
I mean, government, we avoided catastrophe.
That's right. So we are now in a different environment, and that environment says that government needs to and does play a role in how we need to get ourselves. So
what Harry's asking is when it comes down to brass tacks and this bill gets shrunk, what will be in and what won't be in?
Well, I can't tell you
Obviously,
everything.
you don't know everything.
I don't know everything
nobody
will be,
knows
but I
yet.
think the priorities should be a child tax credit, paid family and medical leave, child care. There's a big constituency for home health care workers and for climate.
And as you point out, this is all stuff everybody cares about. It. Every individual issue polls positive.
Right.
But something's coming out.
Yeah. Well, or some things
or be less.
Or be less. And that's fine.
And do you think we'll get the two Democratic senators who are holding out to go for it?
Oh, I think our senators are reasonable. They understand.
She just had a fundraiser with business groups looking to kill
No, wait a minute. Okay, I thought you were talking about ours.
Yeah.
No, the two senators. I don't know.
Not your bailiwick.
Not our Connecticut senators. I know where they are, but the two senators that are really holding everything up. My hope is that they will be. Reasonable, and that their own constituents, when I think of Arizona and I think of West Virginia is one of the most disadvantaged poor states. And imagine what the child tax credit and child care, can do there.
Well, that's how we talk about politics in the country now.
Yeah, I mean.
And Anthony Brown says, Rosa, this is Anthony Brown. I miss you and love you, Rosa. I moved to Texas. You can get a tax exemption for me, Rosa. I'm only 61. Laugh out loud. Love you, Rosa. So now, stepping back, every day it's a new crisis when you're in government, especially now, everything's sped up, where there's something manufactured every day. But you did have a moment there, Rosa, where you did something really impressive. 18 years you fought for something that immediately had the greatest drop in child poverty in our lifetime. What did you take from that? Besides being happy that it worked, what did you glean about what it's possible to do in government and how you accomplish it?
Yeah.
Is it about getting on Fox TV the way some new congressmen say we don't really care if we're on a committee? What's important to us is how many bookings we get on Fox TV. Is that the way you improve people's lives?
No, look, I have to step back and look at this as well because, and I took a lot of lessons from my family. And, my mother said to me, never give up and don't take no for an answer. But in believing that what difference that this tax credit could make in people's lives has been, for me, the impetus. And every day, every year, the last 10, 12 Congress is just continuing to introduce the legislation. But that is the strength of the Congress, Paul. You have the ability every single year to introduce it. You may not get it the first, second, third, fourth, fifth time around, but the players change, the environment changes, the politics change, and you work within that framework to get it done. And I learned that lesson as well from Senator Dodd, who I used to work for, and that was with a family and medical leave. At that time, we couldn't get paid. That was all those years ago. But it was 7 years. Every year he introduced it. George Bush vetoed it. It finally got signed into law by President Clinton. And it has made such a big difference in families' lives that they could take time to be with their loved ones when they were ill or if they were ill. And now, again, after all this time, we're now looking at paid family and medical leave, and which is why I'm so adamant about the child tax credit and making it permanent, is because the moments don't come very often. You have to seize them,
right?
Because it may not come back
Which
again.
I felt Governor Cuomo knew how to do that. When Black Lives Matter happened, he was the one governor in America who saw the one legislative change he'd been trying to get for years, which is the way that the state government allowed the local police union contracts not to release reports about wrongdoing on people's records, and he got that done in the 5 minutes when you can get something passed. I think you're right about when the moments come and you got to seize them.
You have to seize it. You have to seize it. And it may not come back again, or it may take 20, 30 years before it comes back again. You think about it. Think about child care in this country. This is an interesting piece of information. We had child care, national child care from 1943 to 1945. A Congresswoman, Mary Norton, she was known as Batlin Mary from New Jersey, and it was during the war. Women were in the factories. So they set up a national network of child care centers. What happened at the end of the war, they dismantled it. And today we are fighting for child care centers. I mean, it's incredible.
And Anthony brings up about the corporate tax rate going from 35% to 20%, and that's what we're paying for. Before we move on from this subject,
sure, just
to have you on the record, you're confident that some version of child tax credit?
Yes.
And where does that confidence stem from?
Because look, the president believes in it. I know he does. He mentioned it on Friday when he came to talk to us on Capitol Hill. As a matter of fact, and this is not self-serving, he looked at me and he said to me, Rosa, I know you're the author. He says, and we're going to, we are working on it. And I know he wants to make it permanent. I know that the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, does as well. My colleague, who's chair of the Ways and Means Committee, Richie Neal, is fighting
and it's
for
not
the
a
same
hot
thing.
button issue the way some others are in the package. Isn't it more like getting the priority paid attention to when you're cutting as opposed? I mean, at this point, you don't really need to. I don't see the same kind of hostility toward it that I do to some other.
No. There isn't hostility. That's what I said. Earlier on, years and years ago.
You got to get it on the radar.
It's there. And what I do every day, I make several calls. I think if folks at the White House hear from me again, I think they're just going to hang up on me. But I make the calls. But I send out to my colleagues. I think it's important to educate people of what's happening. For instance, changes in the tax have a bigger have an impact on rural families. All the information about what you spoke about hunger dropping, etc. People need to know what the result of it. And this is a program in place, just ready to be extended. You don't have to create it.
We're talking about that with U.S. Rep. Rosa DeLauro here on WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. And Rosa DeLauro, the other big change that was the culmination of decades in Congress is you ascended to this term a kind of lifetime achievement to one of the most powerful positions in Congress. You are the chair of the House Appropriations Committee. Every dollar we spend goes through your committee, and you help set the priorities. Now that you've had, 9 months in the job, what has surprised you most that you didn't know before about what it would take to run that committee and how you get the results you want?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you have to think of, we have a 3-vote majority in the House of Representatives.
It's just tiny.
So it is, and first of all, I love the job. Having the gavel is great. And $1.4 trillion moves through the 12 subcommittees of appropriations. And I'm just going to give you what the Constitution says: no money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequences of appropriations. And so what I have found is that I do a lot of listening to people on where they are, why it would be a yes, why it's a no. And I'm so very, very proud that we have 12 subcommittees. We passed 9 of the 12 bills. They all went through the subcommittee and full committee. 9 passed the House. I am now working on the last 3, and over the next next 6-8 weeks.
You've been involved not just in Congress 3 years before that. You were with Dodd's office and Emily's List. You knew how Congress worked. Was there anything you learned that differently after all these years from actually being in the seat and holding the gavel? I mean, you knew you had to talk to people. You knew where votes had to be. You knew that it takes a lot of work day by day and calling people to get things to stay on an agenda. Anything surprise you? Was there a moment that said, "Oh boy, I never knew this all these years"?
Oh well, a part of that which I knew as well is, and I think we've worked well, is working with my Republican colleagues to pass the legislation.
Have they supported of those 9 bills?
Well,
how many
of the 9
have
bills, I'm going to be very, very honest with you. They have not, though, that they would agree that there's so much of the bills that they like. What they don't like is that what we did was remove the Hyde Amendment from the legislation, which puts low-income women and women of color at health risk.
Well, that's not the 9 bills. That's the $3.5 trillion budget
well,
legislation.
No,
it's
because
another legislation
in the
too.
labor HHS bill there was is the Hyde Amendment, and in state foreign ops, there were 4 or 5 of the subcommittee bills. But look, we will come to a conference at the end, and we will. In the past, we've.
Well, I'm trying to figure out here is if you've had your mind changed about the possibility of bipartisan work, because you've always believed in it.
I do, and I continue to do, though. And we just, passed the continuing resolution. That's the resolution to keep government open.
So bipartisanship is still possible to govern?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, the most interesting example I saw that was that you worked last year with the trade negotiator for Donald Trump. And you had a great working relationship. And you were able to, and this is what I always thought about the Trump presidency. When you look at his actual positions, it's sometimes separated from the kind of craziness with his personality. It's not always, right? He had very conservative views on some things. But on trade, you were able to find a lot of common ground with Donald Trump's negotiator, renegotiate the NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. And everybody was happy with the result. We felt we had we updated that agreement in a way that protected American jobs more, but preserved free trade. So why was that possible? Well,
again, when you're sitting down with people who don't want to just their mode of operation is not to obstruct, but to come to a conclusion. It's going back for me is, when Bob Dole and George McGovern came up with food policy, when Jake Javits of New York dealt with housing policy, when people came together around Social Security and Medicare, et cetera, and the social safety net, these were Republicans and Democrats. They realized that there is a difficulty and that, in fact, we have to come together in some way.
And we did have pandemic relief bills passed under both presidents.
That's right. The CARES bills were all bipartisan, heroes. So, but we do have people whose only job and who just want to say no matter what you say you can't get
So how
them.
do you deal with that as the head of the Appropriations Committee?
Well, you find the people who will say yes, Paul. that
and then some days
best.
it's about negotiating with them, sometimes negotiating to keep your Democrats in line.
That's right.
I thought the most interesting strategic comment I've heard in recent days was Joe Manchin, the conservative Democratic senator from West Virginia, who said, if you want to pass this more ambitious legislation, you have to elect more liberals. So then there was an analysis, Michelle Goldberg, someone from the New York Times, that when FDR passed transformational legislation, he had supermajorities.
That's right.
Although Democrats in those days didn't always support like racial justice laws. And that now when you have only a 1-vote majority in a Senate and a 3-vote majority in the House, there's a limit to how much you can pass.
Well, but again, and I'm very, very proud, no one anticipated that we could pass 9 appropriations bills. And I am working. I will this afternoon. I'm on the phone with the last 3 bills to see if we can finish them up. The Senate has not had any that have passed. They've taken 3 through to committee, and the rest, they may never go through the process. But we had subcommittee markups, full committee markups, and we had debate on the floor of the House. And we got those bills passed. As I said, sometimes people don't understand with regard to appropriations. We pass these bills every year, and they are chock full of policy initiatives.
What happens if they're stuck at the Senate? Then it's just conference.
Well, what the Senate did the last go-round, they never took the bills through a regular committee process. They just posted bills. So we will take what they do, and then we will go to conference with them.
Are they pretty much dysfunctional now, the Senate?
The Senate
given the filibusters, it need to be 60 votes in a party to work.
Yeah. The Senate is very, very tough, and in many cases, as I say, with the House, you can, you're having a debate and you're having conversation, and you do have some people who are obstructionists, but you
have people who do work.
You have people who want the process to work.
And Rosa, DeLauro is talking about the process here in Dateline, New Haven, WNHH-FM. One big role you were cast into was dealing with part of the fallout from the January 6th riot, Confederate rebellion, whatever you want to call it, Nazi storming of Capitol. And you talked very movingly about your own situation there, where your life was in danger. And, luckily, and I'm so glad that a couple people didn't get through a couple seconds earlier and start doing some terrible things. But then you're the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and you're overseeing the Capitol Police.
Right.
So you tried to respond to that by increasing funding of Capitol Police and holding hearings into why there wasn't a more effective response. Is that a good summary?
Yes.
So what happened?
Well, we did, and it was first of all, I must say that the Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police, who were there that day, saved our lives. And so, and what we found was they didn't have the equipment that they needed. They didn't have the intelligence capacity that they needed to make decisions, and we needed to increase the personnel. So I took it as my mission to make sure that the Capitol Police had the funding that they need in order to be able to succeed. We put together the security appropriations bill. We worked with the Senate on that, and in fact, we did pass a security supplemental to deal with what happened on January 6th. Again, there are a couple of pieces that I wanted that maybe the Senate didn't want, and so forth.
But they do have more money now.
But they have more money now. They have the equipment they need now. They have and witness how ready and the fencing, etc. How ready they were for what was portended to be,
but didn't
it didn't materialize, but absolutely.
So that's something
prepared.
You could feel you were able to accomplish in real time, unexpected.
Very,
you weren't
very
thinking
proud.
for 18 years.
Right.
Did you have any thoughts when Kristen Sinema was followed into the bathroom the other night? Does she need more protection? Or?
Oh, look, I think people have to, you have to reserve people's privacy, and that's, I think that's not, that's not called for. You can make your voice heard with your elected officials in other words.
My wife was challenging me on this last night because I was talking about how horrible it was. She says, haven't you as a reporter really harassed people and followed people into things? And she was right. You know, I don't think I've followed them to a bathroom.
Well, listen, I want to just tell you on a constituent basis, and I had my cousin with me. I think I was at Target or someplace. This is years ago. And, a woman came up to me, asked me some questions about an issue that she cared about. I thought I had answered them, etc. And I went into the ladies' room. She followed me in to ask me the question. My cousin said to me, who was like 12 years old, she says, "Oh my God," she says, "she followed you into the bathroom." So no, it's not. You have to reserve people's privacy, but people do have to make their feelings known about, and in other venues, I believe in Arizona, people are letting Senator Sinema know.
David said it got her attention. What about some of the more serious stuff? Like the other night I was at a political event. There was a Republican, I believe, a Republican member of the board of Ed in Brantford. He said it's gotten scary to be in government because he's been so, and it is by a measure of magnitude different. He said to now try to make responsible decisions so kids don't die in a school or so teachers don't have to go to the hospital. You get your physical safety threatened. They now have security at the Brantford Board of Ed. That's not some liberal bastion. So something has fundamentally changed in our country about this.
Well, I think when you unleash division and hate and allow people to think, oftentimes people would think something and maybe not say it. But I do believe that Donald Trump the genie is out of the bottle, that he made it acceptable to say or even do whatever people wanted to do. And even on the January 6th date, encouraged people to fight, etc. And that is hard to reverse. But I think we need, and that's where leadership comes in. That's where you have to have, leaders who are strong and who.
So is it up to leaders? Like, how do we bring civility? How do we bring respect?
I think we have a big role in that.
And how are you going to do that? You did your part with the Capitol Police. You do your part when you just try to make your case and work with people who don't agree with you. Are there other things you can do? Is it up to the rest of us, really, as people who, whether we go on social media or talk to people in public to, I don't know that. Well, how much can the leaders do versus how much do we have responsibility?
I think that one of the things, and this is tied to a legislative piece, is one of the things I'm working on is, the civics secures democracy.
What's that?
That is about, people were more engaged in a public discussion and understanding the differences in the three branches of government, understanding the role of citizens in engaging and listening to one another rather than being at cross purposes, etc. And when I speak to kids' classes, I always say to them, and I do this a lot, you hold on to your opinions, but listen to others, and that's the basis on which you can have a debate and a dialogue. They may persuade you to their point of view. You may persuade them, and that's how we move forward. And what we should do, and I said this was before January 6th, what we don't do in this institution in the Congress is fight with our hands or with weapons. We do it with words. And that's, hold on to your principles, but don't be afraid to listen to others, and you share values.
As
you
Howard
share
Dean
principles.
says, he said, democracy is our way to have wars for power transfer without killing each other. Is that going to change now? The John Lewis Act is dead. There's a new version that Joe Manchin had that was more modest. That doesn't look very promising. Are our elections safe? When you're looking at these,
I think that's Paul.
Well, when Trump runs again, are people going to allow him to lose, or are people going to get killed?
Well, one, I hope he is not going to run again, and that won't be that won't happen. But but I think you've hit on, I've said this, I think, on this program before. Democracy is fragile.
Yeah.
And we have to safeguard it. And you look at what's happening all over the country with the suppression of the vote, of just unbelievable.
But also,
laws.
there's this other level now that we could just say if we lose, we won. And it doesn't matter what facts come out. You're just going to say we won. You have recounts. We won. We'll hire someone who makes conspiracy theories to do the official recount, and they still won. They'll still say it got cheated. So, they're borrowing that playbook in other countries.
Scary.
El Salvador, the president's borrowing Trump's playbook, saying we're just going to call it illegitimate if we don't win, and we're going to beat people up. And we're here reading about elections officials, Republicans as well as Democrats, who say they might not be able to do the job anymore because of the threats of violence. This is getting serious.
It is. No, it's not getting. It is very serious. That Voting Rights Act is critically important. the fighting back against these voter suppression laws, instead of us making it easier for people to participate in the vote. The right to vote was won, and bitterly. People died for that right to vote, and we should not be, summarily giving it up. We need to fight for that right to vote. But it is a scary time. It is a perilous time, and we need to be so vigilant and just counter these activities which put our democracy at grave risk.
And it's also a time of opportunity.
Yes.
Since the last time you came in here, which was not that long ago, you passed a bill that cut child poverty by more in 1 month than we'd seen in our entire lifetime. You changed the Capitol Police from an underfunded force without intelligence to one that's ready to protect our democracy. So we're worried, but we also can always have reason, rational reason, intelligent reason to feel like good things can happen.
Yes, but listen, it's maybe what is in the Tale of Two Cities. It's the best of times and the worst of times. And you think about it, because I want to take this to the American Rescue Plan, $1.9 trillion, save people's lives, jobs, their health with vaccines, etc. We're now looking at infrastructure and jobs, creating millions of jobs for people, and this human infrastructure, which has it's all historic, and it is the New Deal, in a way that we have not seen in years. It is an investment, not in government. It is an investment in people. That is what all of this is about.
Okay. Rosa DeLauro, thank you so much. U.S. Representative from New Haven. Thanks for making time to fill us in, and then we're going to find out the conclusion. Hopefully you'll come back and tell us whether we were able to pull that off and continue to save people's household income, keep kids from going hungry, keep people in their homes. You're on the front lines, Rosa. Keep fighting, and thanks for coming in to fill us in.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And I'm sorry we didn't get to all your comments. Nancy says, thank you, Rosa. Thanks, everybody, for listening today. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience, performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free, from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night on WNHH New Haven's home for community radio.